Friends, all the great civilizations of the world, without exception, going back many thousands of years, have always known, or at least a section of its Illuminati have known, that within the human body itself there are hidden sources of energy and vision. In the Bible it says, the light of the body is in the eye, and if thine eye be single, then thy body shall be full of light. I think that's the clearest statement one can have with regard to the extraordinary possibilities of the inner eye.
I want you to imagine something with me. Imagine that inside your head is a little pod, a little eye, a tiny little eye. Just imagine it for a second. This little eye could potentially be the source of spiritual experience, intuition, creativity, insight, and it's also potentially the source and the origins of where most religious experiences come from. So today I want to take you on a little adventure with me, and I hope you'll come along for the ride. And we're going to explore this idea of the third eye. A lot of people experience this with DMT, with ayahuasca and things like that, but those are temporary. When you get it through these techniques that we're learning more and more about, it explodes. The other thing we also see is that huge inner strength, inner vibration, inner energy, and then you are able to overcome disease, overcome things like that. Creativity and beauty, that's a huge one, the outcome of tapping into this third eye. The fourth one is the idea of intuition, of actually meeting intelligence, of getting information from sources you would not have imagined before, seeing things before they happen. These are all claims of the third eye awakening. And the fourth one, which is ultimate bliss. I mean, bliss that is unimaginable. Now, all these are the promises of opening the third eye. And the last one is the idea of the eternal life. That means overcoming death. So the biggest promise that a lot of these cultures and there were mostly hidden secret schools around the world was this idea of immortality. That you physically may die, but your consciousness continues in some dramatic way. So the biggest promise that a lot of these cultures and there were mostly hidden secret schools around the world was this idea of immortality. That you physically may die, but your consciousness continues in some dramatic way into the heavens and can return and can go further and further. This was the big promise. So let's look at the science of this now. The human is made up of three brains actually. We have what they call the reptilian complex, right? The reptilian complex is the one that goes from the base of your spine, from your sex organs, right up your spine and meets the brain, our neocortex, the new brain, at the pineal gland. It meets there. So the pineal gland is actually not part of the new brain. It is part of the old brain, what we call our dinosaur brain or our reptilian brain. This brain and the reptilian brain of lizards, snakes is identical. Identical. In fact, if you took us apart and you just took away our neocortex and our limbic, we are a serpent in the spine. We just have a spinal cord, and that's what we have. Right? And so what we found is that this system meets here at the limbic region. This is the home of all our emotions. So what happens at the reptilian complex? At the reptilian complex, we control things like consciousness, sleep, circadian rhythms. We control feeling good, serotonin. We control things like melatonin, sleep, depth of sleep, patterns, things like that. We control that at our pineal and thalamus and pituitary glands. That all happens here. When you get to this part, you're in what they call the limbic region. And the limbic region is our emotional region. That's where we deal with pain, suffering, attachment, those things, right? And the top is the new human dilemma, which makes us think, which organizes our minds, which gets in the way, tells us what to do, whispering all the time in our ears. This is why the yogis always say, silence the brain, you know. Because what you're trying to do is you're not trying to silence the whole brain, you're trying to silence the neocortex, this frontal lobe, this whole area of excessive activity. And in fact, they found that in most meditation, this area goes slowly down in mindfulness, in yoga. And this is what is controlled. But they also found that in certain systems like Kundalini, the limbic and the reptilian get active, beautifully active. Right? So what is the purpose of practice? The purpose of practice is that you're climbing up this center here to here. So this is the pineal, you're coming up to there in the pineal, which is what the reptilians all have, right? This idea of the reptilian brain. And then we are going further and we're hitting the pineal gland, which is actually, they found with biology now, it's actually an eye. It has got rods and cones. So if you do any search in any biological textbook or Wikipedia, wherever you go, you will find that the pineal gland has rods and cones. So for some reason, we have been given this eye, this old eye that we don't use. It points slightly limp, but it can be activated and moved up a bit. Right? The pineal gland is also responsible for melatonin, which is the molecule required to sleep. It shuts down the brain at night, it gives you circadian rhythms, it gives you relaxation. It's a tool, right? Melatonin. And the other tool that comes out of it, which is in the body, is the serotonin, which is the feel-good molecule. So if you want to be happy, serotonin is up. And serotonin, by the way, comes mostly from our stomach. Mostly from our stomach. So we are what we eat. We are only as happy as what we eat. It's true. But in certain circumstances, when the pineal gland opens, serotonin gets created. And you feel really good in meditation or in blissful states. This is a picture of what they call a calcified pineal gland. So they think that by the time a child gets to a certain age, most of their pineal gland is covered with calcium, is calcified. Right? That means that it's not able to see carefully. It's not able to see. So that means you have to take extraordinary measures to open your third eye. It is not easy to do. It is not easy to do, but it is possible. In the next 5 years, we're going to see the whole conversation about hallucinogenics changing in the world. But I want to talk about that because there's only one that the human body produces, right? And it's called DMT, dimethyltryptamines. Let me explain how the brain works. The brain has a bunch of these receptors, okay? Which are your neural receptors. So every time a neuron is triggered, a neural dendrite has to send a signal to the receptor, and that gives a feeling or an emotion or an instruction. It's a synaptic instruction. It tells you what to do. So if you want to sleep, melatonin kicks in, the receptor changes, and that becomes your sleep receptor. Then you say, okay, fall asleep. Serotonin, I'm happy, boom, happiness occurs. Nicotine, I smoke a cigarette, I feel stimulated for a while, that gives me my receptor, right? So the brain works on the basis of these receptors. Now what they found was that serotonin, which is the feel-good molecule, has a structure like this. So it fits onto the brain somewhere with this structure of molecules. Forget the chemistry, it just fits like this. But they found that with mushrooms, very similar structure, just one added complex molecules here, right? They found with DMT, which is what I'm going to talk about now, that it is actually very similar and it just connects in a new way here. Dimethyltryptamine, called the God molecule. And this is the baby that we've been looking for all these years. And I think we finally found it. This is the molecule that the pineal gland creates, right? It's a distortion of serotonin. So under certain circumstances, like excessive sunlight, darkness, fasting, hallucinogens, meditation, rhythm, dancing, trancing, you will get an awakening inside the pineal gland that releases DMT. So we do know that there is a biology today that can explain the experience of spiritual enlightenment, of mystical experiences. And I would suggest to you, this is my argument, that this is the root of all religions. You know, everything else is scripture and metaphor after that. At its core is this awakening. But I would suggest to you something else, that it's actually an awakening of three different parts. One is the lower part, which connects us to earth. One is the heart, and one is the head. Now, to get to the head, we have to go through the heart. This is the yoga. This is the idea of yoga, right? You have to climb up. That's why we say ascension. That's why we say aspiration. That's why we say lift your mind up, because you're going upwards. You have to climb up. That's why we say ascension. That's why we say aspiration. That's why we say lift your mind up, because you're going upwards. That means we're trying to get to the pineal gland. Right? That's what it means. Right? The awakening process is what all these systems are about. The lizard brain, the reptilian brain, if correctly managed, can open a pineal gland, a third eye in our heads, that if managed correctly, can take control of our cortex and stop our thinking process, which is meditation. And then with intention, or samana, we can go forward and we can induce an intention. I want to be awakened. I want to be creative. I want to have insight. I want to understand. I want to heal. I want to have my balance in my life. And in the Indian system, what they say is that you go up there, open that, and then you come and live at the heart, where the soul lives, apparently. This is the key. That in your heart, if you can live in your heart and meet cosmos with your brain, this is the Indian metaphor. So you have to balance all three. Right? The sun gazing, by the way, that first hour after sunrise and that first hour before sunset is when the UV of the sun is low, and it has been shown to clear the pineal gland. What I'm suggesting to you is that you can treat meditation in one of two ways. You can treat meditation as a way of just calming down and overcoming stress and worry and fear and anxiety, right? And mindfulness, to be observant, to be aware, to be in this moment. Meditation like that is beautiful. But then there's also meditation with intention, which we call prayer also, which is to turn upwards, turn inwards, and ask to be lifted up. Right? And that's quite something else. All of us should strive in some way to connect with this in some little way, even in our lives. And that's going to be a very good experience for all of us.